The banker's smile vanished the very moment she swiped the card. Her fingers froze over the keyboard. The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. "Ma'am?" she whispered, leaning closer, her voice shaking. "Please, don't leave." I stared at her, confused. "I'm just here to cancel it," I said. "It's only $2,500. She swallowed hard and glanced toward the glass-walled offices behind her. "No," she said softly. "It is not. Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is part of our community, ready to uncover this secret with me." The air in Cape Cod always smelled like salt and dying leaves after a storm. 5 years ago, that scent was suffocating. I stood in the foyer of the estate my grandfather built, watching the rain lash against the windows. The funeral had ended 2 hours prior. I thought we were mourning a man. I did not realize my father, Charles, was actually measuring the drapes for his new kingdom. "It's done, Olivia," he said. "No grief. No, I am sorry for your loss. Just a cold, transactional statement." He looked at me with the same disdain he would show a barnacle on a ship's hull. "The house is mine. The siren is mine. And you? You are a liability. We are finally riding off." My throat felt like it was full of sea glass. I had lived in this house for 23 years. I had scraped the hull of the siren until my fingers bled. I thought being adopted meant being chosen. Charles proved it just meant being leased. "I am not blood," I whispered. It was not a question. "No," he snapped. "You were an obligation, a debt your grandfather felt he owed to the world. But the debt is settled." He reached into his jacket pocket and tossed a plastic card at me. It clattered on the hardwood floor between us. "There are $2,500 on that. Consider it your relocation fee. Take it and go. Madison needs your room for her new yoga studio." I looked at the card. It felt like a hot coal in my hand. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that I had been the silent investor in this family's stability for a decade. But I did not. I just stood there, my boots echoing in the hollow silence of a home that was no longer mine. People ask why I did not fight back that night. They do not understand the invisible chain of being a survivor. When you grow up in a house where your place is always conditional, you live in a cage without bars. You learn to be quiet, so you are not noticed. You learn to survive by not causing a scene, constantly hoping that one day, if you are good enough, the lease will finally become a deed. I was not being weak. I was a survivor. In a house where my presence was a subscription I was no longer allowed to pay for. Charles opened the heavy oak door. The wind howled inside, bringing the spray of the Atlantic with it. "Go, Olivia. Do not look back. You are not part of this narrative anymore." I stepped out into the freezing dark. The click of the lock turning behind me was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I did not cry. I did not ask why. I just gripped that card until it bit into my palm, promising myself I would never touch a single cent of his charity. I walked away, with nothing but my pride, and a past I was determined to outrun. I sat in that glass-walled office, the silence ringing in my ears like a high-pitched alarm. Outside the glass, the lobby was a blur of expensive cologne and hushed transactions. But inside, time had simply stopped. The bank manager, Mr. Miller, was not looking at my worn army coat anymore. He was looking at me like I was a ghost that had just walked through a wall. Then the door opened. It was not just another bank employee. It was Christopher. He had been my grandfather's legal shadow for 30 years, a man who spoke in fine print and lived in the crevices of maritime law. He walked in, set a heavy leather briefcase on the mahogany desk, and gave me a single somber nod. He did not look surprised to see me. He looked like he had been waiting 5 years to have this specific conversation. "It is time, Olivia," he said. I did not move. I did not breathe. "Mr. Miller turned the monitor toward me again. "Miss Donovan," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "This card was never meant to provide for you. It was a bridge to this." I looked at the screen The numbers swam before my eyes, then locked into focus. $9,500,000. I did not gasp. I did not burst into tears. Anger was not loud this time. It was clinical. It was a balance sheet, finally being reconciled. For 5 years, I had counted pennies on research vessels, while Charles and Madison treated my grandfather's legacy like a personal buffet. I had lived in a tiny cabin, my skin stinging from salt and cold, believing I was an unloved burden. But as I stared at those 7 digits, I realized my grandfather had not abandoned me. He had weaponized the time I spent away. This was the moment the invisible chain finally snapped. For years, I had been living in that house without bars, constantly seeking validation from a father who was never going to give it. I had been a survivor, staying quiet to stay safe, hoping that if I was good enough, I would be accepted. But standing in this office, I was not just a survivor anymore. I was an owner. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for years, and today their credit had run out. "Christopher," I said, my voice sounding steadier than it had in a decade, "what are the immediate protocols for this trust?" "You have total oversight, Olivia," he replied. "The maturity period ended 30 days ago. As of this moment, you are the sole trustee of the family's liquid assets and maritime holdings." I leaned forward, the cold clarity of a predator taking hold. "Freeze it," I said. "Christopher, as the sole trustee, I'm revoking all authorized user access for Charles and Madison. Cancel their corporate cards and freeze the trust-funded sub-accounts they've been draining for years. Block all access immediately. This is not revenge, it is accounting. And as of now, the Donovan family is officially in default." My phone did not just buzz, it screamed. I had barely stepped out of the mahogany-scented silence of the bank and back into the biting Cape Cod air when the first wave of digital panic hit. 27 missed calls, 11 text messages. Most were from Charles, but a few were from Madison, dripping with the kind of venom that only people who feel their unearned safety slipping away can produce. I did not answer a single one. I stood on the sidewalk, watching the gray Atlantic churn in the distance, and felt a strange, icy calm. 5 years ago, a single scowl from Charles would have made me retreat into myself, a turtle pulling into a shell that never quite fit. Now, I just saw a bad investment trying to renegotiate a closed contract. I sat in my rental car and finally scrolled through the messages. The first few from Charles were typical. "Olivia, the siren needs a new fuel pump. It is $6,800. Transfer the funds to the harbor account immediately. Do not make me remind you what this family has done for you." The entitlement was staggering. He was not even asking. He was invoicing me for the privilege of being his daughter. Christopher had already informed me that the harbor account was one of the lines I had just frozen. Charles was likely standing at the docks right now, red-faced, holding a declined corporate card while a mechanic waited for payment. Then came Madison's contribution to the fire. She had posted a photo of the estate's sunroom, my old bedroom, now filled with overpriced mats and sage candles. Her caption read, "Finally cleared out the last of the guest energy. Some people are born to own the view, others are just meant to pass through it. So grateful for real family and real blood." I rubbed my eyes, trying to summon the old hurt, but there was only clarity. I was not a daughter to them. I was a utility. I had been the silent investor in their version of family, footing the emotional and financial bill, while they overdrafted my compassion until the account was bone dry. Christopher tapped on my car window. He held a tablet, his face a mask of professional neutrality. "Charles just attempted to withdraw $50,000 from the Siren's operating fund at a local branch," he said. "The system flagged it, and he was escorted out. He is currently calling the main office, claiming identity theft." "It is not identity theft," I said, my voice clinical. "It is a repossession." "He is going to escalate, Olivia. Men like Charles do not handle the word no well, especially when it is whispered by the person they thought they had buried." "Let him," I replied. I opened my laptop, the screen glowing with a different kind of sunrise, the kind made of facts, numbers, and quiet retribution. He thinks this is a family dispute. He is still playing by the rules of emotion. I am playing by the rules of maritime law and trust oversight. This was not a breakdown. It was a balance sheet being leveled. I looked at Christopher. Issue the formal notice. 30 days for them to vacate the estate. And tell the harbor master that the siren is no longer available for private use. If Charles so much as steps on the deck, it is trespassing. And the $2,500 he gave you? Christopher asked. Send it back, I said, with interest. I want every cent of his charity out of my life. I am not his debt anymore. He is mine. The air in Christopher's private study felt heavy, thick with the scent of old parchment and the weight of overdue consequences. He did not look at me as he slid a translucent blue folder across the desk. The math did not just stop at $9,500,000, Olivia, he said. I started digging into the titles for the siren and the coastal land your biological parents left behind. It was not just a simple inheritance dispute. It was a harvest. I opened the folder. My eyes scanned the documents, searching for the logic in the chaos. There it was, a sale agreement for the 3-acre plot on the Massachusetts Sound, the only piece of my birth parents that Charles had not been able to touch. Or so I thought. The signature at the bottom was Eleanor, dated 3 years ago. But the ink was too fresh, the loops of the letters too deliberate. It was a forgery. Charles hadn't just signed a name. He used an expired power of attorney and a bribed notary to bypass my grandfather's safeguards. He liquidated my past to fund his gambling debts and Madison's social climb. This was wire fraud and felony forgery. He sold your parents' legacy for $750,000, Christopher said. And the siren? He has been telling the harbor master it is his, but the registration remained in the trust. He has been illegally leasing a vessel he never owned. I felt a cold vibration in my chest. This was not just greed anymore. It was a felony. I reached into the folder and found a second sealed envelope, old and yellowed at the edges. My grandfather's handwriting was unmistakable. My brave girl, the letter began, if you are reading this, the time has come to see Charles for exactly who he is. I knew he would try to erase you. I knew his resentment for a child that was not his would eventually consume his common sense. I had to let him show his hand. If I had simply handed you the keys, he would have spent his life trying to dismantle you. I needed you to be a survivor before I could make you an owner. For a moment, the room seemed to tilt. I realized then that my grandfather's silence had not been abandonment. It was the ultimate protection. He was the silent guardian, watching from the crevices of legal clauses, waiting for the exact moment Charles would hang himself with his own tether. This was not just a discovery. It was a kill shot. I looked at the forgery again. Every stroke of that fake signature was a nail in the coffin of Charles's version of family. Christopher, I said, handing him the file. File the criminal complaint for forgery and misappropriation of trust funds. I do not want a settlement. I want a conviction. The morning of the eviction was gray and still. I sat in Christopher's sedan, watching 2 sheriff's deputies walk up the gravel path of the estate. Charles was standing on the porch, a coffee mug in his hand, looking out over the property like a king inspecting a realm that was never actually his. When the deputies handed him the papers, his posture did not just break. It evaporated. The mug shattered against the wood, dark coffee staining the porch like a growing shadow. I stepped out of the car, my boots crunching on the shells and stone, and for the first time in 5 years, I did not feel like a guest. I felt like the owner of the very ground he was standing on. Madison appeared at the door, her face a mask of smudged makeup and genuine terror. She started screaming about her studio, her furniture, her rights. But the law does not care about a lifestyle built on someone else's dime. As the deputies began the process of clearing the house, Charles saw me. He did not yell this time. He collapsed. He literally dropped to his knees on that porch, the same one where he had tossed the card at me like a piece of trash 5 years ago. Olivia, he choked out. We are family. Blood is thicker than water. Please, you cannot do this to your own father. I looked down at him, and I finally understood the illusory power of the empty wallet. Charles had lived his entire life believing that money bought personality, that status was the same thing as character. He was a rented king. His authority, his arrogance, Even his sense of self, it was all a shell he had leased using the trust's credit. Now that the funds were gone and the liquid assets frozen, there was nothing left underneath but a hollow, desperate man. He was not losing a home. He was losing the only thing that made people tolerate him. "You said blood was everything, Charles," I said, my voice as flat and clinical as a foreclosure notice. "You told me DNA was the only currency that mattered in this house. So, I am taking the house, the siren, and every cent you forged from my parents' legacy. Where are we supposed to go?" Madison wailed, clutching a designer bag like it could save her from the sidewalk. "I do not know," I replied. "Maybe you can find a room for $2,500. After all, you told me that was more than enough for a relocation fee." The deputies guided them toward the gate, the final boundary of the narrative they had tried to write me out of. Charles looked back one last time, but there was no regret in his eyes, only the panic of a predator who had finally become the prey. "Goodbye, Charles," I said quietly. "You chose DNA over character. Now, let your DNA feed you." The estate was finally silent. The moving trucks were gone, and the heavy oak doors were locked against the past. I did not spend the night in the master bedroom. Instead, I walked down to the harbor. The siren was waiting for me, her hull bobbing gently against the pier in the moonlight. She was more than just wood and steel now. She was a vessel of justice. Christopher met me at the dock. He handed me a small, heavy box. "I found this in the safe behind your grandfather's desk," he said. I opened it and felt a lump form in my throat. It was the gold watch, the one Charles had looked me in the eye and lied about 5 years ago. I fastened the leather strap around my wrist, the weight of it grounding me. This was the real inheritance. Not the millions, but the confirmation that I was seen. The first board meeting for the Eleanor Foundation for Adopted Children happened right there on the deck of the ship. We converted the estate into a legal and educational sanctuary, funded by the $9,500,000 Charles thought was his. I spent my life being told I was a guest. Now, I was the one building the home. Standing on the bow as we headed into open water, I finally understood what it meant to let go of bloodlines and find myself. For years, I believed that DNA was a debt I could never repay. But looking back at the shoreline, I realized that some doors are meant to stay locked. Letting go of a toxic family is not an act of betrayal. It is an act of self-preservation. I did not win because I took their money. I won because I stopped needing their permission to exist. If you are listening to this and you feel like the invisible one in your own family, this is my letter to you. You are not a liability. You are not a phase. Your value is not a line item on someone else's balance sheet. Sometimes the greatest gift people can give you is their rejection, because it forces you to build a foundation that is entirely your own. Your light does not depend on their recognition. It burns because of the character you built in the dark. The storm has passed, and for the first time in my life, the air is clear. I am Olivia Donovan. I am a survivor, an architect of my own future, and I am finally free. If this story reminded you of a moment where you had to find your own footing, I want to hear from you. Share your journey in the comments, subscribe, and stay close. We are just getting started.